My coffee stopped halfway to my mouth when the woman from the Portland flight walked straight toward my table. She stopped beside the empty chair in a pale floral dress, her blonde hair loose around her shoulders, smiling at me while I was still trying to convince myself it couldn't be her. "So you really are the first officer from my flight," she said, pulling out the chair. "Good, this time neither of us gets to disappear after 20 seconds. I set my mug down. The Harbor Glass Cafe was exactly the kind of mid-coast Maine spot you chose for a blind date when you wanted the option of a quick exit. Wood floors, the smell of roasted beans, and a view of the water. My friend Kayla, a flight attendant who seemed to think my single status was a logistics problem she needed to solve, had set this up. She had specifically refused to send a photo. "Just go, Ryan. Her name is Hannah. She's great. Don't overthink it. I was a commercial airline pilot." Overthinking, or at least anticipating variables, was literally my job. I had arrived 12 minutes early, run through the likely conversational exits if things were awkward, and ordered a black coffee. I had not prepared for the variable of Hannah. I stood up, stepping around the small table to pull the chair out the rest of the way for her. I didn't offer a handshake, and I didn't lean in for an awkward hug. I just looked at her, matching the clear, bright amusement in her eyes. "I didn't expect to see you here," I said, keeping my voice level, "but I can guarantee I have more than 20 seconds today." She sat down, smoothing the light fabric of her dress over her knees. She silenced her phone with one quick swipe, placed it face down on the table, and left it there. "I'm holding you to that. Kayla said you flew, but she called you a captain. I figured she was either inflating your resume or you got a very fast promotion since April." "First officer," I corrected, taking my seat again. "Kayla likes to round up. It makes her stories better." Hannah laughed. It was the same laugh I remembered from Portland 3 months earlier. That first time, our flight had already landed. Steve Ramirez, the captain I was flying with, and I were standing near the cockpit door while passengers filed out. Hannah had paused because the aisle ahead of her stalled. She glanced into the flight deck, then at me. "Please tell me you were the one who landed that thing," she had said. I almost kept my coffee in the cup. "I was," I said. "I'll accept almost as a compliment." Steve called my name from behind me because we still had post-flight work to finish. The line moved. Hannah smiled once, said, "Then thank you, first officer," and was gone. That was it. Maybe 20 seconds. I remembered wanting to know her name. I also remembered deciding not to chase a passenger down the jet bridge while I was in uniform. I wasn't going to use my job as an excuse to make someone feel cornered. So I went back to work and assumed that was the end of it. Now she was across from me at Harbor Glass ordering an iced latte music, as if social circles routinely handed people second chances. "It's a lot of coffee and a very rigid alarm clock," I told her when she asked how I survived regional schedules. "Kayla didn't give me much about you, either. Just that I was required to show up. I own Salt and Cedar," Hannah said, "hair studio a few blocks off Main Street. Kayla has been sitting in my chair for 2 years, usually complaining about airline scheduling while I highlight her hair. Last week she suddenly started telling me about a very reliable pilot who apparently needed to leave his apartment more often. I leave my apartment." Her eyebrows lifted. "I go to airports." That got the laugh again. The date never settled into the usual blind date rhythm of polite questions and careful answers. Hannah asked what I actually liked about flying, instead of whether turbulence scared me. I told her about the quiet at cruise and the satisfaction of making a decision early before weather or timing forced a worse one on you. She told me what people misunderstood about owning a salon. Cutting hair was only part of it. The rest was staff schedules, supply orders, clients who ran late, clients who arrived early, and the constant temptation to squeeze one more person into a day that was already full. "I'm trying to stop doing that," she said. "Doing what?" "Selling every empty hour back to the business." There was no self-pity in it. She said it the way someone described a habit she had finally noticed. I liked that about her. Actually, I liked too many things too quickly. The way she looked directly at me when she asked a question. The way she could tease without turning everything into a joke. The fact that she spoke about the salon with pride even while admitting it could swallow her schedule whole. An hour passed, then another. My coffee went cold. Hannah's iced latte became mostly ice. Neither of us reached for our phones. Eventually, she checked the time and winced. "I really do have inventory waiting for me." "I should let you go. I didn't say I wanted to go." She picked up her phone, then stayed seated for another second. Wednesday dinner. I had duty Wednesday and an early report the following morning. I knew that without opening a calendar. Wednesday I'm flying, I said. Thursday morning I'm free before you open, or Monday evening after I'm back in Maine. Hannah stared at me for half a second, then smiled. Did you just give me alternate date windows? I gave you 2 times I can actually keep. Thursday morning, she said. Breakfast, Thursday. She stood and smoothed the skirt of her pale floral dress. I rose with her. And Ryan, yeah, I remembered you too. For the first time all afternoon, she sounded almost careful. I thought about going back toward the cockpit to ask your name, she said. Then I decided bothering the crew after landing might be a terrible idea. You made the right call. I know. Her smile returned. Luckily, Kayla is noisier than both of us. She walked toward the door, then glanced back once through the bright cafe. The first time I'd watched her leave, I had accepted that 20 seconds was all I was getting. This time I had Thursday morning. That felt different. The next morning, Steve and I were preparing for a flight out of Portland when the weather at our destination started getting worse faster than the original forecast. I pulled up the latest information, checked the timing, and worked through an alternate before Steve asked for one. I wasn't trying to decide for him. He was the captain. My job was to make sure we had good options before we needed them. Best case, it clears before we get there, I said. If it doesn't, this keeps us from improvising late. Steve looked over the numbers, nodded once, and used the plan. That was how I liked work. See the problem early. Leave room. Don't promise what you can't control. 10 minutes later, my tablet updated with a message from crew scheduling. Because of a training backlog, my line for the next 3 weeks had been replaced with reserve. I read it twice. Reserve meant the airline could take a day. I thought I understood, and hand me a different one with a phone call. Thursday breakfast with Hannah was still possible. After that, very little was certain. Clear's throat, I stared at the screen, then thought about the woman who had just told me she was trying to stop selling every empty hour back to her business. For once I had a problem with no useful third option. I texted her before we pushed back. Small schedule change on my side. Thursday is still mine. After that, I may become annoying. Her reply came a minute later. You were already a pilot. I priced that in. I smiled, put the phone away, and went to work. Reserve gave us 4 days before proving its point. On Wednesday night, I was in a hotel room in Newark. I had been expecting to finish early enough to get home and make Thursday breakfast. At 7:15, crew scheduling reassigned me to a late Chicago flight. I looked at the new release time. Breakfast was gone. I called Hannah that night instead of waiting until morning. She answered on the second ring. Hello, Captain Bennett, still first officer, and I'm calling because tomorrow morning just disappeared. The teasing left her voice. Okay, what happened? Crew change. I won't be back in Maine until tomorrow afternoon. I kept the explanation there. Monday at 6:30 is still mine. I can come to Rockland. There was a brief silence. Monday at 6:30 works, she said. Then she added, I have one rule. I'm listening. If work moves a plan, we move it. We don't erase it. No, sometime next week, because that's how people quietly stop seeing each other. The sentence landed harder than the schedule change had. If I cancel, I give you a new time, I said. And if I cancel, I give you one. Monday, 6:30. Good. Her voice softened again. Now go fly to Chicago. When Monday came, I parked in downtown Rockland early and walked towards Salt and Cedar. The shades were down, but the lights inside were still on. Through the front glass, I could see Hannah wiping a mirror and checking something at the reception desk. I stayed outside. At 6:30, the lock clicked. Hannah stepped onto the sidewalk in jeans and a soft green sweater, her hair twisted into a loose clip. She looked tired until she saw me. Then she smiled. I saw you out here 10 minutes ago, she said while locking the door. I know. You didn't knock. You said 6:30. She gave me an approving look. Were you pacing? No. You cleaned the same mirror twice. Hannah glanced back through the glass. Long day. We walked toward the harbor and picked up coffee from a small window near the water. The evening had cooled enough that we both kept our hands around the cups while we sat on a bench facing the boats. She told me about a client who changed her mind halfway through a color service. I told her about spending one night in Chicago for a trip that had originally been nowhere near Chicago. Neither story was important. That was what made the hour feel important. I was used to talking about work with people who wanted the highlights. Hannah talked about the irritating middle of a day, the part nobody posted pictures of. I found myself doing the same. I'm glad you cared that it got canceled. At one point, she looked at me over the rim of her cup. Are you disappointed about Thursday? Yes. The answer came out before I could make it more reasonable. Her expression changed slightly. I'm glad, she said. That sounds unfriendly. No, I mean I'm glad you cared that it got canceled. I looked out at the darkening harbor. Planning usually worked best when emotions stayed out of the equation. With her, I was starting to understand that disappointment could be useful information. When I walked her back to her car 2 hours later, neither of us called the evening a successful reschedule. Before she opened the car door, Hannah looked at me and said, "Text me when you're back from the next trip. Not if you're free, not sometime. When I'm back," I said. She nodded, satisfied. It just felt like our second date. 2 weeks into reserve, we found another small opening. I was free Friday morning until noon. Hannah opened Salt and Cedar at 8:30. We planned breakfast at a diner on Route 1 and gave ourselves 45 minutes. At 6:55, while I was already sitting in the parking lot, my phone lit up. Paige has a flat. I have to open alone and get the bridal trial stations ready. Breakfast is dead. A second message arrived before I could answer, but I'm not erasing it. If you're willing to come to the salon, I can give you coffee and 10 quiet minutes once I get the place ready. I read that one twice, on my way. Salt and Cedar was dark except for the back room when I arrived. Hannah unlocked the front door with a stack of towels against one hip. "Morning," she said. "Welcome to the least romantic date I've ever proposed." I still came. She stepped aside and pointed toward the leather waiting bench near the front window. "Sit there. I need about half an hour. And don't help, I'll lose track of what I've already done." "Understood." She nodded once and went back to work. I sat while she moved through the salon. The place changed as she worked. Mirror lights came on one row at a time. Clean towels appeared at each station. She checked the first appointments, moved a product shipment out of the walkway, answered a call from a nervous bridesmaid, and somehow made the woman laugh before hanging up. Hannah didn't rush, even when she was clearly moving fast. That was the part I noticed. She never made the person in front of her feel like the next problem was more important. I had seen a version of that at the cafe. Here, it was the thing holding the whole room together. I stayed out of her way. At 7:35, she carried 2 coffees to the waiting area and dropped into the seat beside me. 10 minutes, she said. I ignored 2 booking requests to keep them. That sounds serious. It is. She handed me a cup. For a minute, neither of us said much. She leaned back against the bench, eyes closed, while I drank coffee that was stronger than it had any reason to be. A loose strand of hair had slipped across her cheek. My hand shifted before I stopped against my own knee. We weren't there yet. The fact that I wanted to touch her felt new enough that I didn't need to rush it. Hannah opened her eyes and caught me looking. Her gaze dropped briefly to the strand, then returned to mine. "You were going to move that, weren't you?" I thought about it. A small smile touched her mouth. She left the strand where it was. "Next time you can ask." The space between us changed without either of us moving, then she lifted her coffee. "You're still looking at me." "I am." "Why?" "Because you're good at this." She glanced toward the salon floor, at folding towels. "At making 5 things need you without making any of them feel like they're competing." That quieted her. "Most people tell me I make it look easy," she said. "You don't." Her eyebrows lifted. "I mean, it doesn't look easy. You just look like you know what matters first." For once, she didn't turn the compliment into a joke. She looked down at her coffee, then back at me. "You really didn't have to come here. I wanted to. I know, but this isn't much of a date." I set my cup on the small table beside us. "Hannah, I'm not here because Kayla matched us and I'm being polite. I want to keep seeing you." Her face softened, but she held my gaze. "I want that too. I'm serious about it." "How serious?" I had the strange urge to qualify the answer. "I didn't. I'm courting you." That brought her smile back. "That word is about 80 years older than this salon. I still mean it." She studied me for another second, amusement giving way to something warmer. "Okay," she said. "Then Monday night after I close, I'll buy dinner." "You don't have to buy dinner." "I know, I want to." The front door rattled. A group of women had arrived 10 minutes early. Hannah looked toward them, then at the clock. "There are your 10 minutes." I stood. She caught my sleeve before I could step away. The touch lasted maybe a second. "Ryan, yeah, thanks for letting this count." I looked at her hand as she let go. "It counts because you asked me to be here." That was all. She unlocked the door for the bridal party. I left with half a coffee, and the ridiculous feeling that 10 minutes in a salon waiting area had told me more about her than 2 hours at the cafe. A few nights later, I knocked on the glass at Salt and Cedar after closing. Hannah had 2 deli sandwiches waiting at the reception desk and a pair of paper cups of soup. She had changed out of her work apron, but not done anything else to make the evening look like a date. I liked that more than I expected. We ate in the quiet salon while rain tapped against the front windows. The room still held a faint trace of shampoo and hair color, softened by the damp air seeping in from outside. Reserve would end the following week. For the first time in almost a month, I could see a stretch of days that belonged mostly to me. That should have made things easier. Instead, I took out my phone and made them complicated. I'm off Tuesday and Wednesday, I said. Then I have a 4-day block. If that moves, I could do Friday morning. And if Friday goes bad, Sunday after Ryan. I looked up. She had stopped eating, put the calendar down for a second. I set the phone face down beside my sandwich. Hannah rubbed one thumb along the edge of her paper cup. She wasn't angry. That made me listen harder. I know this is how your brain works, she said. And I know you're trying to make sure we see each other. But when you give me 3 backups before we've even picked the first plan, I start feeling like I'm one more thing you're fitting between everything else. That isn't what you are. I know you don't mean it that way. She took a breath, but I don't want to be a contingency. I don't want to be Thursday if Tuesday fails and Sunday if Thursday fails. I want to know you actually wanted Tuesday. I leaned back in the chair. My first impulse was to explain. Planning was how I made uncertainty manageable. It was how I kept from overpromising. It was also, if I was being less flattering about it, how I kept disappointment from getting too close. So I didn't explain. I do want Tuesday, I said. Hannah waited. And when Thursday breakfast disappeared, I hated it. Her shoulders eased a little. I missed you, I added. Not the plan, you. That was harder to say than it should have been. She looked down. Okay, she said quietly. That helps. I watched her fold the paper from her sandwich into a smaller square. What about you? What about me? You tell me not to erase plans, but you also keep giving the salon every hour it asks for. Her mouth tightened because I had landed close. I know. Why? She quiet for long enough that the rain against the windows got louder. Because if I never promise anybody the time, I never have to admit I chose work over them, she said. I can just say the day got away from me. There was no dramatic confession in it, just an uncomfortable truth sitting between 2 half-finished sandwiches. I understood it because mine looked similar from the other side. I tried to control the future before it could disappoint me. Hannah kept the future loose enough that disappointment could never accuse her of breaking a promise. Neither habit was especially useful if we wanted to matter to each other. So we pick one thing, I said. One thing, the first Saturday after reserve ends. No backup list. Hannah looked toward the dark salon floor. Saturday is my busiest day. I know, she thought for a moment. 3:30, she said. I'll stop booking at 3:00. No late color, no squeeze in. I'll keep the afternoon clear. What if the airline calls with extra flying? I'll say I have plans. Her eyes came back to mine. Hard plans, hard plans. Hannah smiled, small and tired and real. Then Saturday at 3:30, I reached for my sandwich again. She reached for hers. The calendar stayed face down between us for the rest of dinner. The test arrived 2 days before Saturday. Steve called while I was putting groceries away. Cruise scheduling has an open trip out of Portland, he said, Friday through Sunday. They're offering double pay. Normally, I would have said yes before he finished the sentence. I liked flying and extra trips made sense. I had spent years being the person who took useful opportunities when they appeared. I looked at the calendar on my refrigerator. Saturday, 3:30. Hannah's name was the only thing written there. I can't, I said. Steve was quiet for a second. You sick? No, then this is new. I have plans. He laughed once. All right. I'll tell them to keep calling people. That was the entire conversation. I didn't call Hannah afterward. I didn't need her to know what the plan had cost me. The point was that I had chosen it before something better paying showed up. For the rest of the week, Saturday stayed where it was. Then Friday afternoon Hannah called. I was at the gym. I stepped off the treadmill when I saw her name. Hey, Ryan Page is sick. Her voice was tight, but she spoke quickly and clearly. She's out tomorrow. I have her cuts, my clients, and a wedding party in the morning. I can't leave at 3:00. For 1 second, the old answer rose automatically. No problem. We'll do it another time. It would have been easy, reasonable even. It would also have made Saturday disappear without either of us having to admit that losing it hurt. A colder thought followed it. Maybe this was how people vanished from each other. Not with one decision, but with enough perfectly understandable cancellations that eventually nobody suggested the next hour. I almost gave her the easy exit, then I heard her breathe in to keep talking. So 3:30 is gone, she said, but I'm not erasing the day. I can be finished by 7:15 if I stop taking walk-ins after 6:00 and let Heather close the retail count. 7:15 same day. That's my new time. The tension in my chest eased so fast I noticed it. She had gotten there before my old defense could. 7:15 works. I'm going to look terrible. I doubt that. No, listen. Work pants, hair up, possibly chemical smell. I heard the time. 7:15. There was a pause. Okay, she said. I'll see you then. I want dinner with you. I want this day with music, you. When Saturday evening came, I was outside Salt and Cedar at 7:12. At 7:16, the door opened. Hannah stepped onto the sidewalk in black work pants and a black t-shirt with a pale mark near the hem. Her hair was twisted into a messy knot. She looked exhausted in the uncomplicated way people look when they have spent all day being useful to other people. She locked the door, rested one hand on it for a second, then faced me. This is what you get, she said. I looked at her. No floral dress? Absolutely not. Good. She narrowed her eyes. Good, I liked the dress. I stepped closer but stopped before touching her. I just don't want the version of you that has 2 hours to get ready to be the only version I get. The strain in her face eased. I'm sweaty. You own a salon. I'm assuming there's soap somewhere in your future. Hannah gave me a tired laugh. Then she looked more serious. Do you still want to go? Yes. The answer came fast enough that she didn't have time to doubt it. I want dinner with you. I want this day with you. 7:15 is still the day. Her eyes warmed. She reached down and took my hand. That mattered more than if the original plan had gone perfectly. 3 weeks earlier, Hannah had made me promise not to let work turn a cancellation into disappearance. Now she had done the same thing from her side, without asking me to rescue the evening for her. We walked toward the harbor and found a pub with an open booth. Dinner was burgers and fries, not whatever I had imagined for 3:30. Hannah told me about the wedding party, the stylist who had gotten sick, and the client who brought a photograph of a haircut that would have required different hair entirely. I told her Steve had called about an open trip. Her hand stopped halfway to a fry. You turned it down. I had plans. With me? Yes, you didn't tell me. I'm telling you now because it came up, not because you owe me anything. Hannah studied my face. Then she nodded once. Good that you didn't turn it into a receipt. I smiled. She reached across the table and took my hand again. I moved today because I had to, she said. I didn't sell it. I know, that was the difference. By the time we left, the harbor was dark and most of the shops had closed. We walked slowly, still holding hands. For once, neither of us checked the time. 2 days later, my first normal stretch of days off began. I asked Hannah to meet me at Harbor Glass at 9:00 on Tuesday morning. Not because it was the only window available, but because I wanted to take her back to the place where all of this had started and ask her something without a backup option waiting behind it. She walked in wearing jeans and a simple sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders. When she saw me at the same small table, she smiled and came straight over. This table again? She asked. I thought it had a decent record. She sat and placed her phone face down beside the latte I had ordered for her. I kept mine in my pocket. For a few seconds I looked at her and felt the old instinct to arrange the conversation before I entered it. Start here. Explain this. Leave an exit if she needed one. Then I remembered the first time I had watched her disappear down a jet bridge because keeping the boundary had been the right thing to do. This was different. Now the respectful thing was to be clear. I don't want this to stay casual, I said. Hannah's expression changed. The smile softened, but she didn't look away. I don't want to keep waiting for a lucky opening in the schedule and pretending that's enough. I want a relationship with you, exclusive. I want to know that when I come home from a 4-day trip, I'm coming back to someone I chose. And when you lock the salon at night, I want to be someone you can choose too. She was quiet. Not a frightening quiet, a thinking one. I let her have it. Finally, Hannah wrapped both hands around her latte. I was hoping you were going to say that. Some tension I had not admitted to carrying left my shoulders. You were? Yes, she smiled. Although there was a small part of me that thought you brought me back here to explain why dating had failed a scheduling review. That sounds like something I would deserve. Maybe a little, then. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. I want the relationship, too, Ryan Bennett. The The words were simple enough that I felt them more than anything dramatic she could have said. Exclusive, I asked. Yes, real relationship. Yes, Hannah squeezed my hand. And the rule stays, if work moves it, we move it. We don't erase it. I nodded. She looked at me for another moment, then her smile turned almost shy. There's something I never told you. What? At the blind date, I recognized you before I checked the name on the reservation. I stared at her. You knew before you walked over. I saw you through the window, she laughed softly. I stood outside for maybe 5 seconds thinking, that cannot be him, so the surprise face was partly an act, no. The surprise was that I had apparently agreed to a blind date with the one man I had already regretted not asking for a name. That settled somewhere deep. On the flight, I had assumed I was the only one carrying that tiny unfinished moment forward. I hadn't been. I wanted to ask your name, too, I said. I know that now. I didn't because you were a passenger and I was working. I'm glad you didn't. So am I, she leaned back, still holding my hand. Now you can ask me anything you want. I looked at her. Can I kiss you? Her answer was immediate. Yes. We left our drinks half finished and walked outside toward the harbor. The morning was cool, the boardwalk still quiet. I stopped near the rail and turned toward her. Hannah stepped in first. Her hands rested against my chest. I put one hand at her waist and kissed her. It wasn't rushed. There was no urgency to prove anything. It was warm and sure. The kind of kiss that felt less like finally getting somewhere and more like agreeing to stay. When we pulled apart, she stayed close. That was longer than 20 seconds, she said. It was good. She smiled and squeezed my hand. We went back inside for the coffee we had abandoned. I didn't check the time. 6 weeks later, I came back to Rockland after a 4-day trip. It was a Tuesday evening in late October. I had been awake since 4:00 that morning. My duffel was over one shoulder, and I still had enough airport in my head that every quiet room felt unusually quiet. Salt and Cedar was supposed to close before our dinner reservation. When I reached the salon, the closed sign was already turned, but the lights were still on. I pushed through the door. Hannah was near the back with a broom, sweeping the last clippings from around a chair. Her hair was tied up. There was a pale stain on one side of her apron. She looked nothing like the woman in the floral dress at Harbor Glass. I liked the sight of her even more now because I knew what it meant. She had finished a real day. I had arrived at the end of it. Heather, one of the junior stylists, was packing her bag near the front. She looked up at me. Hey boss, your pilot's here. Hannah glanced over her shoulder. Her whole face changed. Ryan's here, she corrected. Heather smiled, said goodnight, and left. Hannah leaned the broom against the wall and brushed a few stray hairs from her palms before looking at the clock. 7:20. Our reservation had been for 7:10. She looked back at me. 7:20 instead of 7:10. No apology, no panic, just a new time. I set my duffel beside the reception desk. 7:20 works. You've been awake since 4:00. I have. You still want dinner. I'm still here. The answer made her smile. Give me 2 minutes to lock up. I waited while she turned off the station lights, checked the back door, and set the alarm. She came around the desk with her bag over one shoulder and held out her hand. I took it. Outside, Main Street had gone quiet. The Italian place had already given away our table, so we kept walking toward the harbor until we found somewhere else still serving food. Nothing about the evening looked like the plan we had made. That no longer felt like failure. My job still changed days without asking me. Hannah still had clients whose appointments ran long. Some weeks we ate breakfast when other couples would have called it lunch. Some Fridays became Tuesdays. Sometimes I got home after midnight and saw her for 12 minutes before she fell asleep. But neither of us used uncertainty as an excuse to disappear. A plan could move. We moved it. Then we showed up. Hannah squeezed my hand as we crossed the street. For the first time in my life, I didn't need a better version of the evening waiting somewhere else. There was never a perfect time. There was only the time we chose.